10 lines. It was such a hectic day. You weren't there this morning, were you?
No.
Neither was I.
Oh, you weren't either?
No.
You was here?
No shiur. I got stuck on the way to shiur this morning on Devon.
In the snow?
Not in the snow. My car just died on Devon. So they came to bail me out, and took a while to boost it until I got back. There was no shiur this morning. So don't try and make up anything. Did you already make it up?
I was learning.
Oh.
It's not a Parshat Daf.
No, it's not a Parshat Daf. No. It's the first time in 8 years. I missed almost 8 years. 7 years and 11 months. And I missed completely when I was in town. All right. I think once actually when my wife gave birth. I also missed. That's the other time. All right. We are on Daf base. So I couldn't miss the Yerushalmi tonight, besides the road about the Yerushalmi. Rabbi Bob Bar Memel. Now, the truth is, we really should start from the bottom of Aleph from Aleph. Let's start from the bottom of Aleph from Aleph. The last few lines. Last line. Let's say you planted the trees for the purpose of wood. So, Ma'u shiur chavim b'maiser. Right, you planted for the purpose of wood. Is the fruit which grows on the trees chayiv and meiser nonetheless? Tifluta the Rabbi Bar Memel for the Rabbi Hila. So that's a machlokas Rabbi Bar Memel and Rabbi Hila. The spalg in the end of machlokas are meshamer perois of leitim. You're growing fruit itself for the purpose of wood. Now I'm not sure exactly what fruit it is. I mentioned this yesterday already. Not sure what fruit it is which you go for the purpose of wood, but I guess pine cones, something like that. You're going to use it for fuel. The fruit itself you're going to use for fuel. So Rabbi Bar Memel says, nonetheless, if you happen to eat the fruit is chayiv and meiser. Rabbi Hila b'shem Rabbi Yossi says, potter, if you eat the fruit is exempt from meiser. Rabbi Bar Memel Amar chayiv minada. Rabbi Bar Memel says,
you said meiser, you mean Orlah?
No, I mean meiser. No, I mean meiser. We're going to extrapolate from there to Orlah, but this is meiser. Rabbi Bar Memel Amar chayiv minada. Rabbi Bar Memel said, chayiv meiser from this pasuk. It says, Uva Levi kein lo chelik v'nachlo yimach. Says the Levi should come and get meiser rishon because he has no portion and inheritance with you. For that which you have a portion in and he does not have a portion in, you have to give to him. Yotza hefker, that excludes hefker, where shiur chaviyot showing, but both you and him have equivalent portion. And who leket, who shechol peo, he hefker. Leket, shechol, and peo are the same thing as hefker. As if in all those cases, in all those types, you're exempt from meisers. Rabbi Hila b'shem Rabbi Yossi says, Amar patur. Rabbi Hila, the same name Rabbi Yossi says, you're patur minado. You're exempt because of the following. Now, this again, still talking about meiser, right? So, let me go back and explain Rabbi Hila a little bit. Rabbi Bar Memel, just a drop more. Rabbi Bar Memel holds that even if you grew the fruit l'shem peiros, l'shem eitzim, still the bottom line is you own it, the Levi doesn't own it. So anything you own and the Levi has no inherent rights to, so that's something which you have to give meiser to a Levi. Regardless of the purpose for which you grew it. Doesn't make any difference. You're still chayav to give to the Levi. Now, that's very Bar Memel. Rabbi Hila b'shem Rabbi Yossi Amar Potter. He holds that if you grew the fruit for the purpose of using it as wood, as fuel, so you're exempt. Minador, why you Potter Meiser? Because for the following logic, the following case, which we understand to be Kusbar Shazar Lazera. You plant coriander for the purpose of the seed. Afyarka potter, so the coriander vegetable is still exempt from meisers. Why is that? Because it's not meant to be used for the vegetable is not meant to be used for the purpose of eating. So therefore, if you happen to eat it, it's exempt from meiser. So the same thing should be true. Anytime you plant for the purpose of its wood or of its fuel and not for the purpose of eating, it should be exempt from meiser.
It's like an ikar and a tafel.
What?
It's like an ikar and a tafel. To a certain extent,
like Iker and Tafel, one could learn that way, but look, it's a good way of learning it because, in fact, the next one makes it even more clear that you're probably right. It says, no, Shani Kuzbar Shesh Lagorn Acheres. Maybe Kuzbar is different because Kuzbar you're growing for the purpose of the seeds. So the seeds eventually are going to have meiser taken off from them, right? So maybe that's why you're exempt on the vegetable, because it's true you're not going the vegetable for edibility, but like you say, it's a tofel in this case. The ikar is chayev. Maybe in the case where you grow the vegetable for the purpose of its wood, or the fruit for the purpose of being wood, so there is no ikar which is chayev and meiser. So therefore, perhaps the chiyuv meiser reverts to the fruit, despite the fact that it's being grown for the purpose of the wood. Where there are two parts, one of which is being grown insignificantly, and the one of which is being grown significantly, so I say the chiyuv meiser attached to the significant component, which is the coriander seed, and is not attached to the coriander vegetable. But where there is no significant component, because the entire thing is being grown for the purpose of wood, so perhaps it attaches to the fruit, which is really what you're saying. So it says, okay, if that's the case, v'hei da, hey means which, da, one, Amar da tells us this, which literally, I guess you should translate, which this tells us this, meaning, where Taka does Rabbi Hila learn this halacha then? Rabbi Hila, yeah, from this. Hamakayim Malaya shel kruv lezera. If you have a entire patch of cabbage, which you decided to keep not in order to have cabbage, but in order to get seeds. Now, the seeds of cabbage seeds are not edible. They're not a spice, they're not an herb, they're not anything. You just replant them. So let's say you have this nutcase. He's insane. He's keeping all of his cabbage patch just for the purpose of seeds. So therefore, batla daito. His das is batel, and it's all chayv and meiser. However, klachin yechidim, he's growing specific stalks for the purpose of cultivating seeds, lo batla daito. In that case, I say, you know what? It's taka chayv and meiser. Why? I'm sorry, it's taka exempt from meiser. Because he'll plant the whole patch of cabbage for the purpose of seeds, it's insane. You can't take that into account. But to plant individual seeds for the purpose of meiser, that's a type plant individual stalks for the purpose of seeds, that taka is likely. And therefore, he's exempt on those from meiser. Oh, that's like our case, in fact. Because in our case, the guy is planting the fruit for the purpose of fuel. That's like planting the cabbage, the individual cabbages, for the purpose of seed. It's just like the individual cabbages for the purpose of seed are exempt from meiser. So to in our case, the individual trees, I assume they're individual trees, which are planted for the purpose of fuel, even that the fruit should be used as fuel, they're exempt from meiser. That's Rabbi Hila's svara. Now, Amar Rabbi Yoina said, "V'ushaliketi yerek." You should know that in the ratio of this price, so the guy was batla daito, the guy we said was insane. So when do I say he's insane? When he collected the cabbage while it was still green. But what if he followed through on his insanity? The man is a raving lunatic. If he didn't collect it when it was still green, but he waited till in fact it was completely brown, and then collected it, so you want this word should say eitzim chayavim b'maisrus. You want to say the wood is chayav and meiser. The only time we say batla daito and I don't say it's exempt from meiser is if he collects the cabbage when it's still green. So then, even though he claims it's for the seed, we say anech tegatog. We say baloney. We say so you're collecting it for the purpose of the cabbage as well. If you're not, then you're an idiot. Therefore, we don't take you into account. But where Taka waited completely until it turned brown and hard, so then what are we going to make it take meiser off of? It's an empty gesture. Okay? I just said. This fruit which is growing for the purpose of fuel, is it also to steal? Is it also to steal the fruit? So it says, is it obvious? Of course it's also mishum gezel. It's wood. It's fuel. Fuel is also to steal. Right? What did you mean to ask? Or what did he mean to ask? You meant to ask the following. Berry trees. The berries don't have any, literally means they have nothing to them, but it means they can't be used as fuel. So in that case, are the berries also mishum gezel or not? You're growing berry trees for the purpose of using for fuel. Are the berries also to steal because they're part and parcel of the tree, or are they not also to steal because you're growing the tree for the purpose of fuel and berries are not valid forms of fuel?
Are they edible?
Yeah, they're edible, but you're growing for the purpose of fuel. That's what we said. We're talking about this guy is growing his tree for the purpose of fuel. So therefore the berries being edible still makes them insignificant, and there wouldn't be makbid on them. Okay? Says the Gemara, this should be Riemann. Riemann should not the l'shem Riemann is not pomegranate. That's a talking about the inferior fruit. Now you planted it. You, however, planted it for the purpose of the inferior fruit. Normally, people only plant Riemann trees, or most of the time, people plant Riemann trees for the purpose of the wood. But you planted it for the purpose of the fruit. Similarly, it should be hadas. Shenotan l'shem b'nos hadas. You planted the myrtle. Normally you plant myrtles for hadasim. What else would you plant the myrtle bush for, right? But you planted the myrtle for the hadas fruit. Okay, most people don't eat the myrtle fruit, but you plant it for that purpose. What's the status of that vis-a-vis meiser? Is tani, there's some tanoim who learned chayiv, that it's chayiv in meiser. Is tani, there's some tanoim who learned potter, it's exempt from meiser. Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda said, Madam Chayiv, who said it's chayiv in meiser, mokum shechom mishamim. Because there most people watch those plants for the purpose of eating the fruit. Madam our potter says, potter mokum she'ein rov mishamim, where most people do not watch it for the purpose of eating the fruit. Rabbi Yossi said, He asked the question.
So according to this, it's just a...
Right. Rabbi Yossi is going to ask you a question. No, I'm not going to let you ask it. Rabbi Yossi is going to ask you a question. Rabbi Yossi asked tauntingly. He asked, it's a place where most people watch the fruit. Why need any designation whatsoever? If you even if it didn't designate it. Right? Isn't that your question?
Well, I didn't even understand the machlokas. According to Rav Chisda, it's not even machlokas.
Right. It should be just universal, right? All have to do with contingent. Yeah. Right? You're right. And it says, Kachanu Omrim. Do you want to say like this? Zayis v'teinat yachshav alein. What? But an olive and fig tree also need machshava. It's a place where people eat them. They eat them. What is machshava necessary for? Ella. It says, this is the machlokas. Afilu mechza misharmin umechza ein misharmin. We're talking about a case where half of the people watch and half of the people don't watch it. So the shaila is, in that case, what's the halacha? So in that case, we say that it can go either way, right? So then one who holds chayiv, so it says goes by its machshava, right? The one that says potter says it doesn't help his machshavas. It's a place where only half the people watch it, so it's not their darko, and you to do it would be patla dait chaytz or kolodam. So that's how we set up a case where 50-50, whether your machshava can have an impact or not, is the thing. Now, you might ask, your machshava will make it 51-49, right? Or 51-50, right? It should make it a rov, right? The Chori could make it a rov at that point. Now, so obviously, those are not exact. The numbers are not precise. Okay?
Maybe depending on the different communities, some communities would have a custom of doing it one way, and another communities the other way, or it was left up to the individual.
It was left up to the communities.
Up to the community.
Communities, right.
So some would grow it just for the sake of it.
Some grow it for wood, and some right. And I guess it would depend on where you live. Yeah. You know, some people use it like standard fruit. Okay, Ramasya said, mean the basrosa. Ramasya, whatever place this was. Malkum she'ein rov mishamrin. In a place where most people do not use or do not preserve it, meaning for fruit. Even if you didn't designate it for wood, it's still potter. Right? This is really obvious, but it doesn't matter. It seems to obfuscate it more than necessary. In a case where most people don't keep it for fruit, say 50-50, right? So even if you didn't designate it for wood, by definition, by default, it's called wood. And therefore it's exempt from meiser, according to the opinion which exempts this woody fruit from meiser. Rabbi Yochanan b'Shem, Rabbi Shimon, okay, that's all with meiser, period. New sugya. Rabbi Yochanan b'Shem, Rabbi Shimon bar Yotzadok said, Gavin sha'alas b'malkum b'chorshin. A grapevine which came up in a place of forest, Yerushalmi Orlah. It's exempt from Orlah. Why is that? Because it's not going to be cultivated. It's a wild grapevine of that sort. Nobody's going to cultivate it, so therefore it's not designated for the purpose of food. Not designated for the purpose of food. It's exempt from Orlah.
Is a place that's not plowed?
Yeah. Chorshin are, I don't know what the etymology is, I understand.
Chorsha is plowed.
Yeah, but chorsha, even in modern Hebrew, means forest.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
maybe it's because the antithesis. No, yeah, but yar is also used, but chursha means like a grove, I guess would be the more proper terminology.
It's hefker, isn't it? This is.
Yeah, but that's not germane. What's germane is that this is not a place. You're right, it is hefker, but I think what's germane is you're not going to be cultivating.
Anyone then would be giving.
No, but Orlah is only to do with ownership. We're not talking about Meiser, it's talking about Orlah. Orlah is even on even on hefker. Any fruit tree which grows, okay. But here, because of its location, so no, it's not cultivatable. So therefore, it's not. Well, I shouldn't say it's not cultivatable. It's not darko to cultivate. Rabbi Yossi said, you know what? I feel nata. Even if you planted it yourself, you intentionally planted it, it's still exempt from Orlah, because there's nobody plants a tree designated for cultivating as a fruit tree in the middle of a forest. Says the Gemara, wait a minute, didn't we learn even if you plant, even if something comes up on its own, as I just told you, it's Chayv and Orlah, right? So says the Gemara, it's a difference. Tamon there, Kshenota, when you planted or grew and some b'makom yishuv, in a settled place, in a place where things or trees are cultivated. But here, Shenota Makom Chorshin, it was planted, even planted b'yadayim, but planted in a forest where people are not going to cultivate it. Now, this leads to a logical distinction. Rabbi Lezer said, this you would say, when it doesn't make enough to make it worthwhile to deal with it. Tipul. Tfelosa is tipul. It produced enough to make it worthwhile to deal with it, then chayev, and it's chayev in Orlah. Okay? Even in the middle of the forest. Logical, right? Because then it's significant, right? Rav Chuna Shah. Rav Chuna said, this is a great Gemara. Rav Chuna Shah. Esrog shenotel mitzvasa. An esrog you plant the l'shem mitzvah. You plant the esrog tree not to eat the esrogim, not to make esrog jelly with. To medriyot to the mitzvah. As most esrog trees are planted nowadays, right? No, esrog is not a marketable fruit.
But it's for profit.
Yeah, that's the same thing. It's a profit. Ma'ashir chayv orla. Chaza Ravuna v'amar esrog shenotel mitzvaso chayv orla. It's chayv orla. Ask more why. V'lo didn't we learn it says by esrog v'lokachtem lachem, you got to take for you. V'lo mitzvah, which means you're not allowed to take from something, something which is for you, which could be yours, and not from that which is designated for the purpose of mitzvah, which means for Meiser Sheni. Now, that question of itself is unintelligible. But the Mefarshim explain what it means here. The question we mean to ask is that it says by Orlah, Ari lim shalosh shanim ari lim yulachem lo yechel. Or shalosh shanim yelachem ari lim. Whatever the pasuk is. But it says lochem in the pasuk of Orlah. So the Gemara means to ask is just like lochem by esrog. Precludes a tree, precludes that which is designated for the mitzvah, for Meiser Sheni. So to lachem by Orlah should preclude a tree which is designated for a mitzvah for the purpose of esrog. You see that comparison? Lachem should always preclude designation for a mitzvah. So just like lachem precludes by esrog taking anything which was already designated previously for a mitzvah, so to lachem which is stated by Lachem, which is stated by Orlah, should preclude anything designated for a mitzvah. So says the Gemara, no, v'taman lakachtem lachem, misinterpreting that. Taman lakachtem lachem b'domim. There, what we really mean to preclude when it says lakachtem lachem means you got to pay for it out of your own money, right? And v'lo min mitzvah, not pay from it, so to speak, from a mitzvah which you're doing. Meaning, you should take it from your own checking account, not for your foundation's account. So Meiser Sheni is like your foundation account. You can't buy a mitzvah from there, right? B'ram, however, hacha by Orlah, kimad tamar gabi shofar, just like you say by shofar, yom torah lachem, it says yom torah should be to you mikol makom, no matter who owns the shofar, you don't have to own a shofar or be yotzei the mitzvah. So to here, because shalosh shnim yu lachem arilim lo yachel mikol makom lachem means no matter who owns it, it's Orlah. So we reject the comparison by lula by esrog, where we preclude an esrog on ma'aser sheni. It's because we need you to buy it, and ma'aser sheni is not considered to be you buying it, right? Because it already is considered to be the mitzvahs, but all mitzvahs ownership, not your ownership. However, in the case of Orlah, it's similar to the halacha of shofar. There is no essential owner, no essential din of ownership. It doesn't say lukachtem, right? Lukachtem, lachem, means take for your own funds. But here it just says yulachem, just like Yom Teruah yelachem. So not with that, not in the context, not in conjunction to ulakachtem. So there, doesn't have that same halachic meaning. It means no matter who owns it, it's the same thing. Again, I want to stress that. By esrog, it's the juxtaposition of ulakachtem lachem. Ulakachtem, acquire lachem for yourselves, which gives us the halacha that it has to be specifically acquired with your own money as opposed to ma'aser sheni money. Here, lachem just stands on its own. It's not attached to any act of acquisition. So therefore, it's not comparable, and therefore here, Orlah applies no matter who owns it, just as shofar, your yotze, no matter who owns the shofar. Okay? Says the Gemara, Ma beino l'mishamer peirosav leitzim. What's the difference between this case and a person who's mishamer's peiros leitzim? I don't understand. Just like by a person who's watching his food for the purpose of wood, so then there's no orla. So to here, you're watching your fruit, your trees for the purpose of growing as rogan, right? For the mitzvah. So it says now here's a typo. You have to take out the next 5 words, so and add in one word, which is tamon hu rotza be'etzo. Okay, if there, by the case of somebody who's growing the fruit for the wood for the tree for the wood, so then he wants the wood. He doesn't want the fruit. Baram hacha rotzu bepirio. But here by esrog, it's true he wants the fruit for the purpose of the mitzvah, but he wants the fruit. It's not for the wood. He wants it for the fruit. Ve'ena rotza be'etzo. As a matter of fact, he doesn't want the wood at all. He wants the fruit. That's the product which he's desirous of. Furthermore, this is so beautiful. Min hadah. I'll tell you, you know why esrog's chayv and orla? It's got to be because Rabbi China said, "Pri steht doch in Teire, pri eitz hadar." It says, what do you got to take as an esrog? A fruit. If you're going to say it's part, why would you say it's part min arla? Because you're not using it as a fruit. You're using it only for the mitzvah. So then you're not using the mitzvah with it. Because the mitzvah is to take dafka, something which is a pri. You see the Gemara has?
Designated as a pri?
It has to be designated as a pri, that's right. It has to be something which is a fruit, which then you take for the mitzvah. So therefore, it must be chayv and orla. If it wouldn't be chayv and orla, it wouldn't be yotze in the mitzvah. Because it's got to be something which is a pri in order to be yotze in the mitzvah. And you wouldn't be yotze in the mitzvah without it being a pri. It's a beautiful drasha.
Before we were making a distinction between using that pri to eat and using that pri for a mitzvah. And now
but he's saying you can't make that distinction. That's exactly his point.
Now we're saying a different supposition.
Right.
We're saying that if your intent is for AIDS, then it's not even a pri.
Right. That's exactly what we're saying.
Which is weird.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. Oh, come on. That's fantastic. Here, Gemara says explicitly, if you say it's a wood, so
what happens? The only way of having the mitzvah is with a pri, and that it's.
I thought that was. I can't believe you guys don't like that. Oh, come on, you guys are so square. Okay, ma damila. What is what's comparable to that? Now, here's a funny comparison. The word itself will shoot it down. What's comparable to this? If you plant an olive tree in order to light Hanukkah candles with it, you're not yotze, right? Because it has to be Shem and Zayis. And a Zayis means it's a pri, not that it's planted for the purpose of the oil. So it's more boo, boo, boo. I'm Rabbi Yossi Barboon. Zed var Torah v'zed Yivreim. How can you compare the two? Esrog's d'oraisa. And it says in the Teira pri eitz hadar. This is the Rabbanan. It doesn't say anywhere in the Rabbanan it's got to be shemen from a pri zayis. And you're making a comparison, so forget it. Madamila.
What about the olive oil that they use?
See, again, you're copying the Gemara. Madamila. What's comparable? What should you compare it to? Zay shenato lahadlik bo esamen noiro. Right? So shemen zay is zoch. So shemen zay is zoch. That's got to be take from a zayis, because that's the deraisa. And then it's a good comparison, because zed val teira is zed val teira. Rabbi Shimon Yokim bo kumi Rabbi Yochanan.
So wait a minute. So the zayis, they would not be chayiv in oil if you.
No, it is chayiv in oil again, because it must be chayiv in oil in order to be shemen zayis, because otherwise it'd be shemen eitz. Same idea, right? That's the comparison we're making. Okay, now new topic. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Yossi said, you can even divide the same tree in half. Half of it will be for the purpose of eating it, and half of it will be for the purpose of syog, for the purpose of fence, and half of it will be chayiv in orla, half of it will be potter in orla. Yerushalmi Yokim boy kumi Rabbi Yochanan. Yerushalmi Yokim asked for Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah, not otzara tachton l'syog. You divided the tree not vertically but horizontally. The bottom half of the tree meant to serve as a fence. And the top half of the tree meant to serve as l'machol, to serve as food. Or vice versa. Tzara tachton, he meant the bottom half to serve as the food. And the top part to serve as the fence. What's the halacha in these cases? Amar, so he said, hi adah. It's the same thing. This is that, that's that, this is that as well. It's comparable whether you say the lower part is for the fence and the upper part is for the food, or the upper part is for the food, the fence, but the lower part is for the food. How do you know which part is the food part and which part is the fence part? Rabbi said, you're asking a good kasha. Maybe you bring a branch, you make a mark. Ad kan l'syok, and up till here is the fence. From here on in, l'machol, for the purpose of eating. Rabbi Zera asked a very good question. I understand when the bottom half of the tree is meant to be a fence, l'machol, top half of the tree is meant to be food. It's good. However, tzara tachton l'machol, where the bottom half of the tree is meant to be the food, and the other upper part of the tree is meant to be the fence. What's going on here? You want how could this be? The heter, the part which is for the fence, is growing out of the Yisr, the part which is designated for food. It's growing out of it, right? The foliage on top is growing out of the foliage on the bottom. So how can we matter the top half of the tree? It's a product of the bottom half of the tree, and the bottom half of the tree is what you planted for the purpose of food and is also. So the top part of the tree should be also regardless. That's his question. Okay, it's a very good question.
So what is it like when you split the tree in half?
Yeah, but I understand
But the roots, the commonality of the roots are the same.
The Gemara will get that later on. But right now the Gemara understands I can split it vertically because it's two separate halves. But this way, one is growing out of the other. Okay? So Rabbi Zir Kedaite. Rabbi Zir Tak is asking his question according to his line of reasoning elsewhere in Kilayim. Dharma Rabbi Zir B'Shem Rabbi Yonasan. Rabbi Zir is the name Rabbi Yonasan. Batzal Shekili Akerem. If you have an onion of Kili Akerem, of Kilayim in grapes, She'akro, which you uprooted, V'Shaslo, and you replant it. Afilu Mosif Kami, even if it adds a lot. Also, it's forbidden. What grows out of the Isser doesn't overcome the Isser from which it grows. So therefore, the same thing should be true as well. And the Gemara does not answer the question. It's a good question, the Gemara doesn't answer. Not l'shem syog. Not l'syog. You plant it for the purpose of a fence. And then you change your mind. On the side, you want to make it for food. It comes into that thought, meaning that taka changes its status. Now it's considered to be not fence, but food. What about the opposite way? L'machol originally intended to be food, and now you're trying to make it a fence. That's it. Oil already kicked in. It's too late. Locally men, you don't have the right to change it over. The first year planted for the purpose of syog, of a fence. From here on in, for the next 2 years, you decide l'machol. You decide to make it food. Became chayav alav machsheves chiyuv. Once you decided to make it chayav, you should be chayav.
When does the clock start ticking? After the first year, when he becomes his machshava becomes
Yeah, I assume so. From then on in, it starts to
not
be.
from the first
No,
year.
I don't think so. What? Although I don't know for sure, but that would be my hunch. What didn't we learn? Rabbi Yossi Rafila Pnimi Lamacho. That's the Gemara. I don't understand. So then we learn Rabbi Yossi says Rafila Pnimi Lamacho. We said the inner side should be food. V'achitza siyag, and the outside should be fans. Hapnimi chayav. The inner side is chayav. V'achitza pater. The outer side is pater. So why not here as well? Say that say here that the thought which he had, I'm not sure I understand if I recall the question properly. Just give me a second. Yeah, I didn't understand the question properly. Taka didn't give him enough thought. He explains it. Levi Yerushalmi explains. He says, based on the Chazon Ish, he says the question is like this: that let's go back a couple lines. Not Toshana Rishon L'Siyag. You plant the first year for the purpose of a fence. Become veil for the next 2 years. Chishuv L'Macho. Dr. Zell, you were right and I was wrong. That's clear here. That's what the Chazon Ish says. He says, and explain the question, just wasn't thinking it through. Chazon Ish says that the first year he's chayav an orla retroactively. The first year becomes an orla year, even though he didn't think of it, didn't make it a machlo until the second year. So he says, so that's the Gemara's question. Here we see retroactively he becomes chayav an orla once he's designated for machlo. So the Gemara asks, I understand, what's the any difference in Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Yossi says you can divide in half space-wise, right? The two halves of the tree. Why can you divide in half? Also time-wise. The first year should be part, then only subsequently be chayav, right? Maybe it's chayav subsequently for 2 years, or maybe for 3 years, but let the first year be chayav, or be potter, right? So it says more again. Rabbi Yossi Marafila Pnimi L'Machal Chitzon L'Syog top of base on the base. Hapnimi Chayav Chitzon Potter. Says more no. There it's different. Tamon there you set the tone forever. L'Machal that which is set for food is L'Machal almost for food forever. L'Syog that which is set for fence is L'Syog L'Olam is for fence forever. But here became a shiur b'machshavas chiyuv. Once you mix in a machshava to make it chayav, yeh chayav, and makes the entire thing chayav. In other words, here the division was eternal. Here the division is not eternal. Therefore, it has a retroactive impact. Okay, that's so. Therefore, retroactively, the first year is chayav and orla as well. Now, the next line is not supposed to be here. It's supposed to be later on. Until you see where it says V'hosif Tvoso, a line later. That's where it picks up again. But we'll pick up again after Marav because I want to go over in Davin now. We'll pick up here. Finish up quickly. We are now on Beis number Beis, towards the top. V'hosif Tvoso. You see that V'hosif Tvoso? Tosofto, excuse me. Okay, so really it should be, it's a new sugya. Hosif, if it added on Tosofto Mau, it should read. Now this is talking about it grew a third. The tree grew a third for the purpose of a fence, and then he decided to make it suitable to eat. Now, this is very similar to what we have in Trumas U'Maisos. The Gemara is going to make that connection. Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar Tosefes Potter. Rabbi Yirmiyah says even the Tosefes is exempt from Orlah. Rabbi Bo Amar Tosefes Chayiv, the additional amount is Chayiv. Rabbi Yosef said, Hadad Rabbi Yirmiyah, that which Rabbi Yirmiyah said that the rest is Potter, Mischamya, it looks, Chami is in Aramaic as to see, Mischamya Kashi, it looks difficult. Lacy, it's not difficult. Elanicha, it's good. Ke'adar, why does it look difficult? Because of the following. The Tani, we learned, Sadar Shevi or Shlish Lifnei Goy, a field, this is, of course, we saw this by Mises many times, a field which was, grew a third in front of a Goy. The Lachai son, and then a Jew took it after grew a third. Rabbi Akiva merit the Seves Potter. Granted, Rabbi Akiva says the additional amount is Potter, but Chacham Yirmiyah Seves Chayiv. But Chacham say the additional amount is Chayiv, so here too, let's say it's Chayiv. Just like over there, according to Rabbanan at least. So it says Gemara, V'hacha, now here it's a tricky line. Here it says more, V'hacha, Ikar Potter v'tosofto chayev. Here it's different. Here you want the Ikar to be Potter and the Tosefes to be chayev. By Orlah you can't say the same thing. So, way the Levi Yerushalmi explains the name that I read Baz here. Orlah takes effect at the time it's planted. At the time it's planted, the question is what it is. And here Orlah, the moment you plant, since you planted Peptur, even if it grows later on, B'chiyuv, the same tree, B'shas Netiya, it never took effect. When's it going to take effect later on? So this is a very interesting thing which he says. He says, Rabbi Yirmiyah holds, going back to our case from before, he really argues in previous Gemara. If you plant it for Siyog, it can never again, and it grew a third as Siyog, that determines its status. So if it grew for at least 1 year as Siyog, but the truth is even much less than a year, because it grows to a third of its growth within the first year sometime. So once it grew to a third of its growth, Peptur, that's it, it's potter for all time. Because now, the Shem Netiya, which it got, is a Shem Netiya Ptur. By grain, there's nothing to do with the Shem Netiya, how it was planted. There, it's at least according to Rabbanan, has to do with the ongoing growth, right? There's no din Netiya, right? So since there's no din Netiya, it's not comparable to the case we're discussing over here. Okay, that's what Baz says. The distinction is somewhat fuzzy because I don't know any pasuk really by grain, which will give me a sharp focus on the difference between grain and trees. But that's what he says. Trees are netiya, grain is not netiya, and therefore by trees, even once it was planted and grew a third potter, it remains potter. Whereas by grain, we don't say that. Yes.
I was going to say a more comparable case would be if the tree was planted by a goy. And it grew for a year. And it was taken over by a Jew. That
would make a difference because Orlah applies to a non-Jewish tree as well. That's something we're going to learn. See, you're thinking about the rest of it's right. That's okay. That's legitimate. But Orlah is going to apply to Goyish or planted trees as well. It's unique, perhaps, because, again, I think it's not unique.
Yeah, but if it was Hefker, it's Chayiv and Orlah.
Right. Because Orlah is a restriction. Everything else is a matana you give. This is a restriction. So restrictions are words like Dunshin Asein Alav. And Asein might pertain only to Jewish stuff. Alav pertains even to non-Jewish stuff. That's sort of tantamount. Okay. So now we're going to put in what we said before, what we took out before, going back to just before we started over here. Natal Shalosh Shanim. You planted it for 3 years l'siyag. First 3 years in their entirety for fencing. Later you decided to eat it, after the 3 years are over. So it's clear it doesn't have Orlah. That's no Shaila. The question is, what about Neta Revai? The 4th year of Revai. Does it have the 4th year of Revai, right? Revai is like Ma'aser Sheni. The 4th year, everything goes to Yerushalayim, or is redeemed, and the money brought to Yerushalayim. Rabbi Yochanan, Divrei Rabbi Shmuel, now going to where we are now. Rabbi Yochanan, Divrei Rabbi Shmuel said, Kol she'ein lo Orlah, ein lo Revai. Anytime there's no Orlah, there's no Revai. Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Yochanan requires, Ad she'elo sholosh shanim Orlah, that you need 3 years Orlah before you have Revai. Rabbi Yochanan, so here's a little bit of a machlokas where Rabbi Yochanan requires. Rabbi Yochanan says, Ikar Orlah tzricholei, the primary component of Orlah requires. And any Ikar Orlah, Pachas Mishal Shem, there's no Ikar of Orlah, there's no Orlah in less than 3 years. Rabbi Yossi, Ikar Revai tzricholei. It's not that he requires Orlah, he requires the Revai. Kol she'ein lo Orlah, ein lo Revai. Anytime there is no Orlah, there's no Revai. I didn't think it through before, but I guess there is a nafkamina between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yossi. The nafkamina is, let's say, the Gemara we said before, where you thought of midstream in the 3 years to change it from Siyag to Michael, right? So the nafkamina would be if we didn't say it works retroactively. And Rabbi Yirmiyah, of course, says it doesn't work retroactively. Oh, he holds its parts are all together. But let's say we can come up, hypothetically, construct a case, where it would be partially exempt from Orlah and partially chayiv in Orlah. So this would be the machlokas. If you hold it, Revai requires, like Rabbi Yochanan says, 3 years of Orlah. So here there aren't 3 years of Orlah, right? You only have 2 years, a partial Orlah. If you hold, however, that Revai just has to come after Orlah, like Rabbi Yossi says, so regardless of how long the Orlah is, as long as the Revai follows it, that's enough to be mechayiv you. Okay? In other words, even a shorter Orlah, as long as then the 4th year comes subsequent to some Orlah, that's already enough to be mechayiv you Revai. And we don't know. Of course, the Gemara doesn't resolve that question. Tani, we learned. Elon new sugya. Ilan shemiktsasa. I'm wondering if he says here. He doesn't say the low reef shita. The Gemara doesn't resolve the question.
No one would feel that like a kanas to prevent people from a alleged subterfuge that they're growing it for siyag, and then suddenly they decided to
that would be a good valid point, but the Gemara, you're right, the Gemara doesn't bring it up. Maybe later in the Masechta, but it seems not. That's a good question. It says Martani, Ilan shemiktsasa natu baretz, a tree which is partially planted in Eretz Yisrael, miktsasa chutz laretz, and part of chutz laretz. Now first we'll tell you about vis-a-vis Meiser. Mikevin shemiktsasa natu baretz, so it's part of his in Eretz Yisrael. Kilu kula baretz, as if the entire thing is in Eretz Yisrael. Divrei Rebbe. Rishigan Leomer, no, Sana to a baretz. The part which is planted in Eretz Yisrael is chai. Sana to a chutz laretz. Part which is planted in chutz laretz is part from Meiser. Aval b'shem Rabbi Yochanan said, Nasa k'tevel mu kamusa mu rabin zebezeh. That means that the entire tree is part tevel, part meiser, because everything gets mixed up. All the moisture gets mixed up in the tree, but it's part chayev, part potter. So what it means is you can't meiser from any other tree on this tree, right? Because each fruit here is partially chayev, partially potter. So you have to meiser from this fruit in and of itself. Yeah, it's like chatziyah v'chatzi ben chorin. That's right. The same idea. Rabbi Zira b'shem Rabbi Yochanan. Now it's switched to Orlah. Rabbi Zira b'shem Rabbi Yochanan said, Shoresh patur poter. It's an interesting svara. New thing by Orlah. If you have one root, he says we're going to have a Mishnah later. Levi Shlomo brings down a Mishnah we're going to have later on. Not much later on. The Mishnah is going to say that if you have a tree which was completely uprooted except for one root, right? Let's say you had a big storm, and the tree was completely uprooted except for one root. That root still exempts. It still retains its old character as being a tree which is exempt from Orlah. Right? An old tree which is almost completely uprooted. What?
I don't understand. Rabbi Zira looks like he's intruding on the machlokas tanoim here.
But he's not. It's a switch. Rabbi Zira is a new issue. Rabbi Zira is still switching to Orlah. That's the trick. Till now we're talking about Meiser. Now we're switching to Orlah. And Rabbi Zira is saying contradistinction to the previous Gemara. Okay? So again, just like by an old tree which got uprooted but still remains rooted by a single root, it exempts the tree from Orlah. It doesn't have to restart for the 3 years. So here, the one root in Chutz La'aretz exempts you. Says more, wait a minute. Mak Rebbe? Is that like Rebbe? Turning the page now. Oh, give him off. The Rebbe Omer Shroshin Chayin Zemi Zeh. The Rebbe is one who says roots give sustenance to each other. So, in other words, here too, the potter tree spreads its moisture throughout the entire tree because it's like Rebbe. Says more, no. Here it's different. Divrei Akoli. Everybody agrees that by Orlah, Hocha Shoresh Potter Poiter. This doesn't be like Rebbe who said that by a tree half in Eretz Yisrael, half in Chutz La'aretz, the moisture goes all around. No, here everybody agrees Orlah is a separate halacha, that Shoresh Potter is Poiter. Hey, the Tamar, now, but you should know though, there's a catch in this. A tree in Chutz La'aretz is also chayiv in Orlah. It's also chayiv in Orlah. It seems also chayiv in Ravai as well. Only difference is that there's a special halach in Chutz La'aretz. First of all, it's not clear if a tree in Chutz La'aretz is chayiv midaraisa because of halach Moshe Sinai or midarabbanan. Also, there's a nafkamina between Orlah Chutz La'aretz and Orlah Eretz Yisrael, which is really something which is very important to halach l'maisa nowadays. Safek Orlah and Chutz La'aretz you can be mekel, even if it's daraisa. It's halach Moshe Sinai. That Safek Orlah Chutz La'aretz is l'kula. Savik Orlah Eretz Yisrael is la chumra. Savik Orlah and Chutz La'aretz is a kula. That's what we rely on nowadays when we go to a store and we buy fruit without checking if it comes from an Orlah tree or not. Because it's Savik Orlah is la kula. Although you can throw in rove and other things. But the bottom line is that Savik is a kula. If you don't know that it's for Orlah, you don't have to be machmir. Okay? So that's what the difference is whether the shorish comes from Chutz La'aretz or from Eretz Yisrael. Hein the Tamar, Shorish Potter, Poiter, B'Shorish Yoshon. So there's more, no, it's not comparable. Where do I say Shorish Potter is Potter? B'Shorish Yoshon, where I have an old root, in a tree which otherwise got uprooted. B'shorish yoshan, and there should be a vav here. V'sheyishish b'toch shelo toch shel chaveiro. Another case is that vis-a-vis bikurim, not vis-a-vis our Allah of Orlah. Let's say I have a root in my field, and the rest of the tree grows into my friend's field. So it's part of from bikurim. I should make it clear. I have a root in my field, and then my friend bent over my tree. It's took a runner and grew it into his field. So it's exempt from bikurim. Why? Because it's still rooted in my field. So who has to give the bikurim from it? I have to give the bikurim for it. No.
It's getting nourishment.
Sorry, apologize. No, that's Allah. No, it's exempt from bikurim for another reason. Because bikurim has to be ad moscha, your land. And this is not your adama because part of the root is mine. So therefore it's not ad moscha. So the other guy is potter. Okay? Nobody gives you bikurim on it. Yeah, nobody will give bikurim. Yeah. Okay, so in that case, where do I say shorish potter is potter? Only when it's an old root in a new tree, in a tree which otherwise got uprooted or something in that case, or in a case of bikurim. But if there's a root, one root in the chutz la'aretz of a tree which is otherwise in Eretz Yisrael, lo b'da. In that case, I don't say shorish potter, because if you would say shorish potter is potter in this case, then what about the case in our Mishnah? For it's in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi afilu apnimi lemachol v'achitzon l'siyag. Even if the inner one is for food and the outer one is for fence, hapnimi chayev achitzon potter. Rabbi Yossi said you can still divide the tree in half. Well, if you're going to say shorish potter is potter, and then shorish potter is potter, v'yiftor tzad achitzon tzad pnimi, so the whole tree should be exempt. Because the half which is l'siyag should exempt it to the half which is for food purposes. So therefore we have to say like this. We have to say that when is shorish potter chronologically? In other words, it retains, as long as there's an old root in the tree, the tree retains its timeline. And therefore, besides for bikurim, right? We're talking about Orlah right now. By bikurim, it's a separate issue. But by Orlah, what it means is the tree retains its timeline. If it had a timeline of Ptur, and now it got uprooted to a large extent, this old root, so to speak, retains the time frame. The imprinted upon it the memory of what the tree is. But where you have a tree which is planted partially in an area of chiyuv and partially in an area of ptur, that's not the concept of shorish potter. Because otherwise, Rabbi Yossi's halach in our Mishnah doesn't make any sense. You can't divide a tree in two. If we see you can divide a tree in two, that means that in space there's no concept of shorish potter. Only in time is there a concept of shorish potter. Okay? So that's a very good raya from our Mishnah. Let's just go a little bit further. Rabbi Zira Amar Lo Stam. Rabbi Zira said the following statement Stam. And our old friend, haven't had him in a long time again, Rabbi Law said it in the name of Shem Rabbi Lezer. What is this? That, I can't read my handwriting here. That there's no riot from Rabbi Yossi. It's no riot from Rabbi Yossi. Why? Because there, the reason why there, in the case of our Mishnah, the shorish potter is not potter, is because the shorish is it can always revert. In other words, we learned already that if you thought originally Shem Siyag, you can always change it to Shem Michael later on, right? It's originally intended for fence, you can change it to Shem Michael. So there, shorish potter is not potter, because it's kind of an artificial shorish potter, because you can always change it. But if the shorish potter is in chutz la'aretz, you can't change chutz la'aretz to Eretz Yisrael. I mean, obviously there are ways, but in and of it, but not by machshava alone. So therefore there, it's much more real the shorish poter. So it could be that taka from when the shorish poter is in chutz la'aretz, that taka paters the whole tree. Despite the fact that when the shorish poter is in a part of a tree which is the shem b'syag, it doesn't pater the whole tree. Again, because machshava is easy to change. The geographical reality is very difficult to change. Okay, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yochanan said, Shloshim, you know what, it's late, I don't want to keep you any longer. We'll start, to pick up for Rabbi Yossi tomorrow night, it's a new thing.